Appreciate everyone being here for study session. This is the study session from our business team. So we have two items that we're going to cover in study session. The first will be our capital budget recommendations, and the second will be a presentation on FTEs and how they are allocated and the formulas and the considerations that go into distributing those full-time employee equivalents out to our schools so that they can staff their classrooms and support professionals. So Jason, we'll turn it over to you, and then you can introduce your team as needed to move forward with the presentation. And you know how much content you have in each one, so you've got an hour and a half with questions. Use it wisely.
Those are the two things.
Okay.
Thanks, Superintendent. All right, so yeah, the first thing we're going to go through the capital budget recommendations. This is not the first time, hopefully you've seen this, you got this presentation last week, but those that are on the Finance Committee have been working a lot with this. We've had the Budget Committee meetings that we had 2 weeks ago, and so we're just going to go through the things here. So Pete Tweedy, our Assistant Business Administrator and Budget Director, will do the presentation here. I also want to recognize 3 of our team members here. Unless anybody else. One of them we'll excuse today is Robert Boyer. He's got a good excuse for being off today. He's got a daughter going to the MTC tomorrow, so exciting for Robert. Big day tomorrow. And then we have Ryan Clark, our Assistant Accounting Director, Derek Barnes, our Director of Analytics and Projections, and Laura Kerr, that's our Senior Budget Analyst. We'll turn the time over to Bea, and then after her presentation, I'll have the other presentation.
Okay. So we kicked off, budget season lasts almost the whole year, well, but we kicked off this one on December 13th, 2024, when we sent out budget packets to a lot of people throughout the district. There's 2 parts to the budget process. There's capital and there's also operations, and today we're going to be talking about capital. Next on the 12th of March, we're going to have our first district budget committee for operations meeting. So that's up and coming. But we had one of our first meetings with capital on February 6th, and there's several meetings that have come up led up to this one. The first one we met over in physical facilities with many of the department heads who had put in budget requests. And we told them what the available revenue was, we looked at what the requests were, and we met together to try to align the two and try to work within the parameters of the available funding. And so that preparatory meeting led to, we came up with a list and felt like we were successful with that list, and then we went to district budget committee about a week later. And then that list also got discussed and with each person that had put in requests, and then at that point we came up with that, and then it went to DLT, and that's what we're presenting tonight to the board for your approval. The detail, we're not showing the detail spreadsheets, but they are available to you on the business dashboard. So if you go to the business dashboard under the budget section, and there's a link there for FY26 budget process. If there's any other detail that's not discussed today that you want to look at, it will be there for you. I also added something this year, and it's also on that link, is there are spreadsheets showing all the numbers and all the different meetings that we had and what numbers came up in each meeting. But also I added a part where it was the detailed request, like the dialogue of each request with each on each line item, but just really pared it down to actually show what the request dialogue was. So I hope that if you have any questions about more detail on those, that will be useful to you. Okay, let's go to the first slide. Okay, the capital budget revenue available for this for fiscal year 26 is $91,877,496. That consists of estimated FY25 fund balance of about $48.93 million, as well as estimated FY26 tax revenues of about $79.7 million. From that amount, we also take out $10 million for rainy day funds, and we also took out of that amount 26.78 million for money that is set aside in FY25 for the building fund. So that was our bottom line that we came up with as to what we need to stay within is the 91.8 million. Any questions on that so far? Okay, go
So
ahead.
there was one point I was thinking about. So the difference between the capital process and the operations. When we do the operations, a lot of times when we've added a position, it's ongoing, and each time when we do the operations, we're saying this is how much new money there is for new things. But with the capital budget, it's new every time. So we start at 0 every year, and then the same request. So if physical facilities has a certain budget, they need to request it again to be able to repeat. Because there's no, in capital, there are no salaries, it's all projects. And so the funding for that starts at 0 every single year.
Does that include, is there like a regular maintenance?
Mhm.
That's worked into the capital.
Yeah, it'd be requested again every year, any maintenance or any roofing, flooring, all that.
It's addressed as a one-time.
Yep. So if you hear us say zero base budget, that's why.
Truly zero.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so the initial requests that we received this year, we received 42 requests that added up to 113.6 million. The actual, so now you know the revenue, we know we have 91.8. The difference in that was 21.7 million that we had to work through and try to work through to come within that aligned revenue availability. I just wanted to say here too, that preparatory meeting is always, I think it's my favorite meeting of the budget process because it's just a starting point, but everyone comes around that table and they are so great to work with. And watching, last year was my first year watching that, and I kind of went into like, oh my goodness, and I had to run the meeting. And I thought, okay, this is going to be fun, but people were so great and so willing to work together and so willing to say, okay, give and take with that. And I just want to thank the committee that we had a couple weeks ago, but also that preparatory committee that the way they handled that and how methodically they handled that. So of those, right now we have DLT recommended requests include 37 of the 42 requests that we'll discuss today. So on the next slide, we start looking at those 37 requests, and all 37 are listed on the next two slides. The first part of that we put at the top of it, top of the request list, are things that have prior commitments. Bus lease bond payments, property acquisitions, things that we put into the building fund from TNT. And there's nothing that we can really do. We need to meet those commitments. And just as a note, the bus lease payment, that is the last year. This year is the last year for bus lease payments, so we'll finish that up within FY26. The next one, the Link TES annual maintenance, that is significantly higher this year, and I believe it's come to the board already a little bit because we do need to transition to a new platform, more of a website-based platform with Link. We pushed, that's what Alio is now going to be Link. And so Alio, we've pushed it out as far as we possibly can. I think they've asked us to do this changeover for several years, and we never felt like it was the right time. And we're at a point now, especially with the impending split, that we feel like data would be at risk if we don't make that changeover now and get on that platform. So that annual maintenance is higher, but it's a web-based system, and it should do it'll be good for our system.
Is there a changeover expense?
There
that's
is.
beyond the
Yeah,
maintenance?
well,
included in
it's
that.
included
It's
in this
included
one
in it.
this year, so I can't remember what that breakout was, like
So it'll be a little bit
100
less.
Yes,
in the
next year will be
future.
a little bit less. Maybe,
Well, I think this is because we had one in FY25 we had approved. I think it was a little higher, and this has gone down to
Yeah.
the next level. And I think it stays at a certain rate for 2 years, and then it goes up $1 per student for year 3, 4, and 5. So we were able to negotiate it down from like $13 to $9 per student. This still represents the $9.
okay, and then
I have a
go
question,
ahead.
B.
Yeah,
The 500,000 in security cameras and card access, I thought we had almost all card access with all of our schools. Is that just secondary and cameras? are we kind of done with secondary and now we're
Frank, you
focusing
want to
on
speak to
elementary?
that? I'll turn that over to Frank.
So there's ongoing costs to maintain those systems. There's licensing, cameras that have to be updated, access points, card readers that have to be updated. And we're not, we have most of our entry points where we have access control, card readers and stuff, but there's still some miscellaneous doors that we're adding all of the time. School says, hey, we're adjusting how we come into a school, can we put, card readers on this door? And especially now with the new state safety bill that's come out and needing to lock and secure all exterior doors, it's becoming more where we need more electric strikes so that they can program those doors to lock and unlock with class schedules and changes. Example, secondary schools that are going out to have trailers, or they have seminary that they need to go to. So we're constantly adding, and every time we add, that increases our licensing fee
Okay.
and increases
So
our
that's
ongoing
mainly,
maintenance.
it's just mainly maintenance, it's
Yeah.
not, it's nothing, everyone's almost where we need to be that way with cards.
Yeah,
Okay.
everybody's almost where we need to be. I will finish our last group through some safety grant money this year from the elementary for cameras, and then where it's just maintenance and updates and that.
Thank you.
And a lot of the facility requests were very similar to last year, and we kept within pretty close to what you had requested, right, Frank? Okay, I do want to remodel for 3.5 million. I just want to note that we'll talk about that in a couple slides, but just kind of keep that in mind. And if we go to the next one, I just want to highlight a couple of these. Next, several requests were from technology. The first one for $1 million. There's a goal for all classrooms to have a set standard for display and sound, and they've been working on this for over the past, this is year 4 of 4 that they've had this goal. So they're in the final year, FY26 will be the final year for that, by utilizing existing technology and then getting new technology where necessary. Another one I wanted to, also the 21st century devices and third data facility we'll talk about on the next slide also. But the new bus purchase for transportation, they had initially requested 50 buses. This request, kind of how we came within funding parameters, this is 23 buses at 205. Each bus is about 205,000 each. So this will fund 23 buses with the expectation there'll be another request next year to try to get that up to 50. There was some discussion on leasing buses, but it was decided that with the impending split also it'd be easier to just have those bought and be able to split those assets as needed when they're owned outright. Are there any other questions on any other, we got technology, transportation, mail department requested a new mail van. The esports for athletics, that is now sanctioned for FY26. So this is, we did the same thing similar with boys volleyball and then also the lacrosse. What was it?
Boys and girls lacrosse.
Yes, where this is just helping get started for more of the technology that's needed for that sanctioned esports. Communications has a request for Aptigee, which is something that I don't know if Rich is, or Joel, you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. This would replace School Messenger as our main communication tool for schools. The benefit of, there are many, but the benefit is that it works very well with cell phone devices, and it allows everyone to operate in a single site so that they can use the app that's available through Aptigee. They also will go in and redo our websites using them. They then maintain the websites and storage on the websites, and then they will build the infrastructure. They will build will allow us to actually build it into 3 with the potential to facilitate the transition, that we could have landing pages for each of the 3 districts under the umbrella currently of Alpine School District until the time comes in which they will do some back-end changes, and then we would have communication up and running for the new districts as well.
When you say websites, you mean like the existing school websites?
Our existing school websites, yeah. It would bring them all up to speed, make sure that they're all ADA compliant, that they will work well, not only in phones but also on screens, and allow us to create and manage those at the school level a little easier than they currently do. Right now, if you don't speak WordPress, it's very challenging.
And deploy the information out.
That's what it is, like right now, you have to download the message and phones don't wanna do that, so
Correct.
And it can go into the language you set on your phone, so you have 180 different languages available.
love that.
Okay. Then the last one is Who Knew It dashboard. Dashboard for data maintenance and results and achievement. That was from the results and achievement team. Okay, then I just wanted to go over some requests that were funded from other sources. Coming back to the remodel, that is something that as we went through the requests, we realized could be funded from the building fund that we've been setting aside through TNT. That remodel request includes restroom remodels for Lake Ridge Junior, Bonneville Elementary, Orem Elementary, and Meadow Elementary. And also includes a Phase 4 Lake Ridge remodel of 6 classrooms in English and Social Studies. And this is part of a 5-phase remodel project, but this would be Phase 4. Technology, 3rd Data Facility Center. Again, that is something that could be funded from the building fund. This is facility needs for the room itself. To get it ready for fire suppression, emergency power generator. The request this year is just to get the room ready, but next year would actually be outfitting the room and putting all the technology in that facility. Right now the facilities are located in Linden and Westlake, and this one would be in the Central District boundaries. And then technology, again, 21st century devices. The initial request was $7 million. If you look on the previous slide, you can see that it's listed as 5.858 million. That's because partially it's funded through a digital teaching and learning grant, which covers 1.142 million of that. And that's something that we see on other years. We've seen that because it's part of the deployment of student devices into the schools one-to-one. 1-to-1 for secondary, 1-to-1 4 through 6, and then 2-to-1 K through 3. And then the last two for the warehouse, there's 2 that came from warehouse. One was concrete repair for the ground dock, and then also to reconfigure a sump pump during the downspout. There's some drainage that's happening. It kind of creates an ice skating rink on the parking lot where they're unloading the trucks, so it's kind of a safety hazard in a way. But there is revenue coming from surplus sales, so that can be funded through that revenue source. Okay, and then if any additional revenue becomes available, we can increase the building fund. That's a possibility, and then we would always reconvene with the district budget committee and DLT to determine any other budget needs and things that we can address. Okay. Questions?
So B, the last slide, I guess the one before.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that are being funded out of different funds and not in the capital outlay necessarily. They're coming from different funds. But you said there were 37 out of 42 that were recommended.
Yep.
I'm just curious.
Okay.
What were those other 5?
So
that did-
some of those were like the warehouse.
Okay, so some
because
of
we
them
didn't
were
pull-
included.
Some of them are on here.
And the others?
Another one was the West Transportation Center
Okay.
that was requested and just tabled for now.
So were all 5 of those other ones that were being,
Not all. There
No.
was one more helmet reconditioning was requested, and that was not brought over.
what is that?
Football helmets.
Football helmets, lacrosse helmets, things like that. That was the other one that wasn't. But between all that covered all.
And the ones that say building fund, it's still in the fund 32, it's just set aside as a reserve built up in that. So it's still coming from that, but instead of putting as much to the building fund, we would use some of that the year for those 2, the data center and for the remodel budget.
And when are we starting phase 4 for Lake Ridge?
Frank, as soon as Frank gets money.
didn't see like any satellites on here. Are we anticipating needing satellites anywhere, or did I
It
just?
doesn't
miss
say
that?
satellite, but it's portable, see, portable classrooms.
Oh, okay.
Under
And will that cover
facilities.
all of the needs? I know we've got.
That'll cover
multiple
about 8
schools over
moves, you said?
1,000.
I think 8 moves it covers.
Eight moves, unless there's something else that's needed larger, but yeah, 2 classroom trailers to be moved, relocated from current locations to new locations.
And will that meet the needs of all of the schools?
Based on what we've been given from supervisors, we're working, I know, on a couple of things out at Desert Sky Elementary, that may need to adjust a little bit. There's Desert Sky and Thunder Ridge are the 2 that are really hot buttons. We talked earlier today in capital that we may need to address, do something a little different there.
And then if we need to do something different there, will that funding, like the committee will reconvene, or?
Yeah, we'll need to come back and
Yeah, the process there would just be a recommendation from staff to the board saying, let's use a little bit more from the building fund, from fund balance to be able to do that.
So I just have a question about how we move forward with this budget process in the face of knowing that there's 3 districts. I just know in capital planning, we talked about, well, you know, there'd be money to build a new elementary in the central area, but then we need to take that out of the funds that we actually split out when the districts are divided. I was just wondering what your thoughts are, because, you know, some of this we're talking about coming from the building fund. Will we somehow account for how much has come from the building fund for each area when we actually make the split, or have you contemplated any of that idea?
Well, for anything that's happened in FY25 or these recommendations for FY26, it isn't where it would be like,
I
oh,
was
this
gonna
was
say
there.
it's part of us.
Because like last year, this same thing where this year from the building fund, the FY26, we're just, the recommendation is 3.5 million and the 866. Those are the total amounts from that. Even though it generates about $36 million per year. But last year, or in the current year we're in, we had about 20 million authorized, and that was 8 million for the architecture of the new high school and 12 million for the purchase of the land. And that was approved through this same process last year. So that process of the 12 million and the 8 million was approved by the board last year in the similar meeting.
So we're not thinking of trying to account for how much is going to each of the 3 districts?
We haven't
during
yet,
this
but
budget
as we
cycle?
get in, when there's some big spends, then we probably, I mean, the ones for last year, the 12 and the 8, the 20 million, that was pre-split.
Right.
So it was just, it's in this year's budget. We can look at that and track if that's what the board would like, or.
I just thought it would be an interesting discussion to know, so we're not surprised. But now we're kind of, now the split vote has occurred. So do we want to do anything different in terms of accounting for monies going to each of the 3 districts? I know we've talked about, well, are we going to do the class size reduction FTEs and apportion them out proportional to the number of students in each district? Have you talked at all about, you know, when we start accounting for things into 3 pieces?
Yeah, when we've had, for the FTEs from the supervisors, we've had them, okay, look at this, see where it is. But with those, that's not something, those ones don't go to the board and say, hey, this is something where the supervisors and then DLT says this is where the needs are. And that's kind of been directed from the board, make this. But on the capital, it is more of a board decision on things. So I think probably starting for, we could start for FY26 or for FY27 if there's big things on that.
How much is in the building fund right now? 30?
So the fund balance that will carry over, well, estimated, let's see, the amount that carried forward, including the 6 million, there's 6 million kind of allocated for the West Transportation. With that, yeah, but coming into at the end of FY24, it was about 11 million. I believe that was the 7 and the, let's see. So that was the amount coming in. Well, that's the end of 2025.
This is 24.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we need, I'm just saying it would be nice if we kind of projected when we're gonna start that process of kind of accounting.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not this year, maybe it's next year, but it would be kind of nice.
And maybe if there's over 20% or 15% considered to be taken out of that, it comes for a review or
Something like
So
that.
But if I heard right, there's 30 to 40 million in there. This would represent about 10% of that, probably 12% of that. But if we're going to do a significant draw from that, we ought to take that into consideration on how that would be equitably distributed.
And we are tracking the increment funds really carefully, like every line item that we're spending now, that we're really
Yeah.
careful. So I don't think it would be a hard thing, especially with the increment funding.
If you want to go backwards,
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah.
I just worry because different budgets affect different areas differently, like operations, capital. And if you start being really tick-tacky in one budget, then, but not other budgets, I just worry that it moves us away from meeting students' needs. And that should be the goal, 100%, is meeting students' needs and meeting students' needs through the duration of Alpine School District.
And I think we can strike that balance and say, let's meet those needs, but if it's a significant drawdown that would affect, let's be sensitive to that,
Yeah.
bring it to the group to say, hey,
That's
this,
reasonable.
this is not just a small, this is a significant, that would have impact long-term on those districts. So let's bring that to an evaluation and see how that can be addressed, because it would significantly impact the revenues going forward with those other districts.
Well, I think it also impacts the plans that we've laid for years, right? We've had several years in a row where we put money towards that West Transportation Center. So then to hear, no, we've decided to table that, I certainly
Yeah.
did not.
Well, guess
Hold on,
what?
Please just let me finish. Like, you know, like I know when we were talking about this, right, and there had to be priorities. And so I guess my concern is just, we were heading in a direction. And if that was the right direction for students to go, it's concerning me that we're saying we're gonna stop and not continue to move for the transportation
Yeah.
center.
Fair assessment. I think there was a concern that that may not be, if that money is designated for the West, that may not be the priority of the West
Right.
for that. So it pulled off and held, but if we were to go allocate that somewhere else, we probably ought to have those discussions and say, hey, that was earmarked.
Right.
That was intended for that. Let's look through that carefully to see if that should be honored that way or not.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think we have to be upfront with this, that each area has its own deficiencies as far as essential services go. And so we have to, I think we have to look at it through a new lens of what is essential for each area to operate and look at allocations according to that. So I agree, we do need to strike a balance of meeting current student needs and anyway, I think we'll just have to be very intentional about that. But I do think we need to track it.
Yeah, and we are tracking that. And when we're looking at this one, like I said, last year's where we had the 20 million going towards, well, actually even more, it was the 22 million going towards the west. That was pre-split, and that already was decided. These ones here, the building, the remodel fund isn't for one specific area. There is more in one, but it's Frank's team's going to look and say, okay, what are the priorities? Let's do these in order for the whole district. So it's not specific there. The third data center is to be able to benefit all three districts too. There's one in each, the south and the west, but being able to have that, but then in the future being able
Backups, yeah.
to have backups there. So I think when we get to something that says, okay, we need to purchase this land for this amount, or we need to build this new district office, then those are going to be things that are specifically tracked, saying it was used here and not here, so when we divide the fund balance, let's take that into account.
Or if the capital recommends we need an elementary school to start, reopen by next year, we need to start it, that's gonna be 35 million. How are we gonna equitably pay for that across all three areas? Those larger ticket items merit that level of scrutiny.
And at the same time, striking the balance of it is still, you know, we are still responsible for educating these
Yeah.
kids and supporting them all the way through until the split is done. So making sure that resources are being allocated so that when we transition to the new district, like there's no dip in learning and taking care of things, and that nobody is years behind because we weren't proactive. We should be proactive, is what I'm trying to say.
Anyway, it just might be interesting to think about. When are we going to start thinking about that final fund balance transfer, and how are we gonna account for that? So that there's, anyway, the worst thing that can happen is, right before we do that, somebody says, oh, well, you built this data center, that should, that should come out of your part of the fund balance or something like that. It would be much nicer to do it early so that there's no surprises right at the last minute.
And as you can see, one of the first items here was the lease revenue bond payments, which everybody is making now, and those will get divided when it's divided. But then, we have in current legislation, if it passes, if the West can do a lease revenue, if we can do a lease revenue bond as the divided district for the high school in the West, how that legislation reads on how that will be divided. But the principal and interest payments have to be made for the 2 years before
Right.
the split also, and how that's accounted for.
Have we estimated how much that is for that 2 years?
What the payments, if it's
Just if it's just the high school.
If it's 155 million, it's about 10 million per year.
For everyone. Okay.
Good point, Mark. I think we'll have, we have had a sensitivity to that in FTE allocation and additional FTEs, and the same thing can be applied to budget.
I'm not suggesting what the answer should be.
No.
I just think it might be worth thinking
No.
about.
Yeah, I think it's a frame or a mindset to have an awareness to have, and that's what I'm hearing.
There's 3 question marks there, so has there already been 3 questions? Or has there been 2?
It's all the time he has.
Anybody else? Thank you, B. Great work. Okay.
And M&O will be just as
Oh,
pleasant,
so
right?
fun. It will be. You told me that last year too. You're like, just wait for that one.
Well, same good people.
Okay, so this was sent out on Friday also to board members. Same information, so just go through this a little bit. This is the FT allocation process. So currently, Derek Farnes, the last 2 or 3 years, has done the FT, couple years, the FT allocation. Before that, I did it for 7 or 8 years, the process here. So just gonna go through some high level, how that works. At the end, there's some examples of some schools just to address some of the issues when schools get a little bit smaller. So here in the first page, this is from the budget book, the student staffing ratio. Just wanted to highlight a few things here. The left one's from that, the right's just from some of our spreadsheets. So for kindergarten, or for elementary, kindergarten through 6th grade, we showed those ratios up until like 2016 to 2020. Those were all the traditional, so there were some schools, 10 or 11 schools that were on the traditional model, not the extended day. And so those ratios for the traditional schools were a little bit lower on their class sizes because the extended day had the ones where there was the early birds and the later gators. So on average, they were probably closer because they had small groups in the morning and afternoon and the whole group there during the middle of the day. You can see in 2021, the board decided to put some funding towards reducing class size in 5th and 6th grade, and that happened both at the traditional and the extended day model. And then in 2022 is when all of our schools went to the traditional schedule, but the extended day staffing ratio model to be able to do that. So it's not that we increased class size, it's just the way we reported it was a little bit different. For the secondary, you can see there's been a few changes. That used to be the 27.5, the 29. A few years ago, we went to get all of the secondary on the same productivity model, or productivity model for that. Huh?
Salary model. We don't
Yeah.
say productivity anymore.
But that's what it was, yeah, the salary model. And then last year, they switched a little bit, and that was when we have the CTE hourly and 7ths included in the regular. So the ratios went down a little bit because those are accounting against the FT allocations. Any questions on this one here? Okay, so the basics on funding. When we receive funding from the state, it is based not on October 1 counts necessarily, it's on the average daily membership, which isn't attendance, but what is enrolled in a school. So if I have a school that has 1,000 students and the enrollment doesn't change throughout the whole year, the ADM is going to be that 1,000 times the 180 days. And so that would be the ADM, this large number of that. But of course we know at every school there's some that are there for 3 weeks and then they transfer or they come in mid-year. And so the ADM is a way to be able to look, that's how we get funded. So a lot of the elementaries are about the same, about 100% of the October 1 count. They'll have students in and out, but they stay about the same. Junior high is a little bit less than 100%, and then high school is more around 96, 97% of the October 1 count. But when we receive funding, we receive last year's ADM plus any growth from one October 1 to the other. So if you're in a growing district, you're going to get more from that, from the state funding with that growth factor. So there's a little bit of component there. So the calculations for the secondary schools, what we do is that we have a 10-year average of every school of what their ADM was for the year compared to their October 1 count. So like I said, the junior highs, the average is about 99.3, the high schools is 96.6. So the high schools have more students on October 1 than the average they have throughout the year. And same with the junior highs, but really close to 100%. So we project, when we do the projection book each year and present that in November, those are then used for the FT allocations that are done in December and January. So as soon as those have been presented in November, the team, Derek leads that, and go through and be able to project what next year's are and then be able to figure out the ratios from that.
Jason, just to clarify,
Yeah.
when you do those based on like just all of the high schools thrown into an average, or do you look at the average of each school individually?
Average of each school.
Okay, thank
Yep,
you.
so they could vary, and I'll show that on the next slide. Yeah, on that next one. And so, as we showed before, the junior highs, it's 28-1 on the allocation. High school is 28.5, so very close there. But for the secondaries, there's a hold harmless component. So, and that comes through the budget process too, those extra FTEs. But we'll show that on the next one. So this shows the junior highs. So you can see each of the schools has a different percentage. The only one that's over 100% in the last 10 years on average has been Orem Junior. Let's take, for example, the ones that are in yellow here. Why are those in yellow, do you think? Sorry, go ahead, Joanne.
Why do we think that Orem Junior is higher than the others? What is the?
What's the cause of that?
Yeah.
Road.
Because I mean, that area typically we think of as a declining area, but not always. But why do you think it's hitting?
And it's not from one year to the next, it's throughout the year.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that Orem Junior, it's just recently gone over the 100. I think it just recently has had some years where with Vineyard it's grown a little bit in that. Yeah. But statistically it's not a big one there.
Yeah, but you don't see that with the other high growth middle schools.
Yeah.
It probably is, my sense would be, and I don't know how this exactly factors into it, but I would say there's more of a transient population there than other junior highs that we have. I would have to look at the high schools in those areas and to see, but how that in and out factor during the year addresses that. If there's fluctuation there, it may keep it closer to that 100% rather than an area that has less of that factor. Would be one of my assumptions. The demographics would probably affect that in that way. Whereas high growth schools would not have necessarily the turnover with the transient. They would continue to see growth.
Yeah, but then with their average daily membership continue.
They have big growth, but a lot of times you see that those change in enrollments don't happen throughout the year necessarily, but at the semesters or at the term. So they may say, well, I've moved, but I'm still can drive to this other one. Next year I'm going to switch to that. So that's cool. So the two in yellow, and then on the next slide, the one in yellow there, those are ones that had boundary changes. So when there's the boundary change, they don't receive the hold harmless. So if we look at Frontier, so in the current year, they have, October 1 of this year, they had, of 24, they had 1,773, but they're projected to have 1,269 next year with the boundary change. So they aren't held harmless to the 1,773. We readjust it to get to the 1,269. But you can see, let's take example of Canyon View. So they had, on October 1 this past year, 1065, which with the 9849 of the 10-year average between ADM to the October 1 will really be, on average, they'll have 1049 throughout this year. We're just calculating that. And then they're adding 20 students, and that's the difference between the 1085 and the 1065. So we're projecting that instead of the 1085, that's not what they're getting the calculation off. They're getting the 1085 times the 98.49 is 1069. So then when we do the 1069 divided by 28.0 for the ratio, it generates 38.18 FTEs for next year. But you, yeah, go ahead.
Would have been really helpful on this slide for maybe next year to see what they were allocated this year. Because
What the change is.
yeah, is 38.18, is that a change? Is that not a change?
Yeah,
I
we have all
can't
that.
tell.
We can share that with you.
But if that was included, I would appreciate that.
Great, yeah. So on these, some of these, the ones that have the decline, so let's take like Timberline with a decline of 30 students. So instead of that being the 1280 times their 10-year hold harmless, it's just this year's estimated amount, that 1295. So they have 1 year where that's held harmless for that, for the junior highs and high schools. Any questions on this one?
So with this, the percentages, we round, we don't hire any, we no longer hire quarters and, or is that just on the elementary level?
So on these, yeah, they're given that to the 100th place. They're
They
given
are.
that because they can use that for sevenths. They can convert that to hourly teachers.
Okay.
And so there's.
So it's not rounded.
Yeah. Correct. On the elementary, we'll show that part. Okay, here's the slide for the high schools. Same idea as the junior highs. You can see that a lot of the high schools are having a hold harmless this year. So we had about 18 FTEs that will be requested through the budget process to maintain that hold harmless. Essentially, they're still getting the decline. It's just delayed a year when they're getting that.
I tried really hard to understand these formulas, but when I look at Westlake, I can't make sense out of it. They had like a fall head count of 3,042, but next year, even though we're saying they're gonna grow 91 students, their hold harmless number is 3,010, which is a decline. And so I'm really struggling with 91 students as a decline in FTE allocations at a school.
So they didn't get a decline because this, we have to look at the 3042 equates to 2922 based on the 96% that they keep throughout the year. And so the 2922 grows to the 3010, which is
96% of 31, 32.
yeah, but then that addition is, what is that? 88 students from the 2922 to the 3010.
It still loses me when we do that conversion because I can't logically make that make sense that we're having more students, but we're gonna FTE allocate less than what they had in their building this year.
So their FTE, though, the FTE went up because it would be based on last year's projection on it, and we can show you all those calculations and what they've done. So we have an
Because this
individual.
just looks like they're losing. They're getting more students and because of that 96 ratio, which I don't understand that completely either. It seems like that ratio is lower at our high growth schools like Cedar Valley, Lehigh High School, Skyridge is doing a little better at Westlake, but it's lower at those schools that are just growing. And so
So in the spreadsheet, you can see we have like column A and then AP. All those ones that are in that part there, we have every year of their October 1 and their average daily membership that's reported to Utrecht, the state. So we can show you all those too, but it's in an area where if the high schools, a lot if they're graduating early or if they drop out or other things.
So then a school is getting penalized if they graduate early because their ADM decreases?
They're not in the building.
They're not in the building yet.
they have a lower.
Right, but then the next year when you start with lots in the building again, then you're starting with classrooms that
It's still
potentially are more
factored in,
crowded.
it's just that
It's factored
factor
in.
is,
It's-
everyone's projection is calculated by that 10-year average.
Well, but I would say some of our growth has increased exponentially, so when you're taking a 10-year average, that's not representative of like where we are currently.
But that growth is factored in with additional FTEs. It's just showing that they're not gonna give you 100% of that October 1 count. And no one's getting 100% count.
Nobody's getting
Unless you are at that, over that factor.
Jason, will you clarify just again, how many hold harmless FTEs are we gonna need for the middle schools and then the high schools?
We have that, Derek can look and see on those, but we have, I believe we have about 18. The last 3 years, we've had like 17 to 19 total. But we have it broken down by school, so we can get the difference between the junior high and high school. The other factor I was thinking on that, let's see. Yeah. So on those other ones though, we can show you the full report of what the school's seeing.
I mean, like when I compare it to Lone Peak, and they're gonna lose 127 students. I don't know, it just doesn't completely make sense in that formula calculation. And I can't tell you why it looks that way, it just looks like these high growth schools are being penalized.
And without seeing that column where you could compare what they currently have to what they now have, it's hard to see, yeah.
But they're not matching here. And the other schools, the other areas are.
They're not what?
They're not matching. So it's disproportionate to the
Well, the
rest.
hold harmless does provide that, the schools that are declining, they have that 1 year. And we've had lots of discussions about that. We met with all the principals, we brought all the principals in to say, okay, with this, is this something that we eliminate or go to half of those this year? And all of the principals, the feeling was, we need this, it helps those, so we don't have to eliminate programs that we have away. Sometimes if there's a hold harmless, something's going down and then it goes back up, we didn't have to let go and then try and get back teachers that were needed there. But the last few years, we've seen as that bubble of enrollment has gone out of junior highs and now going out of high schools, that it's affecting a lot of schools with that. So the discussion we had with the supervisors and with principals, we brought them all in, is just to say, okay, this year we're keeping it this way, but next year we may go to we're only doing half of that, and then preparing new districts to not have that. The elementaries don't have that hold harmless. But new boards will have to decide, is this something that's beneficial to be able to kind of smooth that out? It's not that it just keeps them there forever. They are going down. We have Lone Peak and American Fork, even with this hold harmless, are going down quite a bit in their FTEs. PG, quite a bit also. So there's,
maybe we need a better conversation about what hold harmless really means and what the actual impact to schools is, because it's not the same across the board.
I would say hold harmless is different in a school that's declining versus a school that's increasing.
there is no hold harmless in increasing.
But there's impact in that change of student membership.
And just to clarify, this doesn't include comprehensive high school numbers. Those are separate bucket.
Correct.
So really the schools that have comprehensive high school are getting that in addition to this, so the number's even larger than it is on here.
Which
On
high
the
schools
allocation.
have the comprehensive program?
So the FTEs, this is their projection for FY26.
Mhm.
They haven't been allocated yet on that. We're still in
I
the
see.
process. So for FY26, they haven't received any of the extras yet.
That's just
Because we
guaranteed.
are seeing declining FTEs. It's not like we're seeing the same number. I have a lot of schools with fewer.
Right, but where the number of comprehensive high school FTEs are going is not proportionate to the number
Because
or.
you don't need
I
that.
see, because the formula
But
is
when we're
accounting for
dipping
declining.
in your enrollment,
but
your
not
FTEs,
up.
it.
It's not affecting your comprehensive curriculum yet.
Right.
But it
We-
does,
we
it
are-
does
Why they
impact
exist.
your class size and what your how many people you have in a building, right? So it's not the same.
But then kids lose opportunities if you're not at least offering something, right? So it's finding that balance of making sure kids have the opportunities.
Well, what it is, it's making sure that your diploma is a valid document by having a comprehensive curriculum offered.
Okay, let's see, this next slide for secondary, so additional allocated FTEs, each of the secondary schools get a 1.25 FTE for PLC coach, which includes a seventh and some days, an FTE for media. Counselors at each school are determined very closely to 350 to 1 ratio. So those are in half increments on the counselors. So we see, okay, who's the next one that gets a half, and be able to do it that way. The high schools also receive a 1.0 plus a seventh for athletic directors. So each high schools are similar in that. Let's see, so here's some more information. Total FTEs for secondary for FY26 was about 1,450 FTEs, growth of just 8.29 over FY25. So with many declining, some going up. The junior highs had a growth of 36.1, and the high schools a decline of 27.81. Now, anybody explain that one to me? Why that one happened?
Is ninth grade?
Because the ninth graders are going out of Cedar Valley into the two. So it's not, they're more equivalent. If there wasn't this change of the Cedar Valley, those would be really close. But it's because now the ninth graders are going back to those two middle schools. All right, so junior high middle, the average FTE for junior highs middle schools is about 49 FTEs, with the max at AF junior at 64 and the min at Mountain Ridge, so both in the central area, 33.93. The high schools, the average is 72.5, with the max at Westlake at 105 and the minimum at Orem at 41.
Yeah, that's where you're hitting your comprehensive.
This is for
next year.
next year.
Mm-hmm. These are their allocated FTEs.
So this budget year, are we doing the full hold harmless or the half?
For FY26, the full hold harmless.
Okay, so have we made a decision on the half?
We haven't yet on that.
Okay.
So on this high school, this minimum at Orem, does that include the comprehensive, or they will get, that's still to come?
That's still possibly to come. Okay, on to elementary. We okay to move on to that? Okay, so the last 2 years we've added the component of having the head count, the ADM to head count. Before on elementaries we didn't because they were so close to 100. And this actually allocates more to elementaries now because the average is 0.25% higher. So schools that grow throughout the year, I think this is where we see more on the high growth, where they're going to grow throughout the year, would benefit from that a little bit on that growth. So we still have the projected October 1 head count. Instead of the secondary, it's just for the school, as I showed you there. But when we're doing it elementary, because every grade has a different ratio, we are doing it per grade. And so for each grade, it's the projected October 1 head count times the 10-year average. And then these are the allocation formulas. So kindergarten is at 23, first and second at 26, third at 29, fourth at 30.2, and fifth and sixth at 31.14. Jordan.
So for schools that haven't existed for 10 years, are you just taking the elementary average, or are you taking the average, like their school that's closest to them that predicts their area's growth?
If they're brand new, then we've got the closest school on that. But if they've been there for 3 years, they have their 3-year average. So it's not hurting them the 70 other years that weren't. It's just giving them the average. But the max we look back is 10
Because
years.
so that could impact like Desert Sky, because it's only been there 2 years, but it has crazy growth, so it's not going to match the average at all.
It's going to be a lot higher because their true growth is going to be higher.
Right,
So it's going to benefit them, not
Yeah.
hurt them.
But what number do you use then? Because you don't have a 10-year average for them.
We just use a 2-year average. Okay. So each grade, so prior to this year for the allocation, we did, each grade was rounded to the nearest half and then summed all together. And so that, before that worked well with when kindergarten was all half-time. Now that kindergarten is full-day kindergarten, it's hard to give a school K6 and say you have 22.5 FTEs Because what do they do with that half? It was easy to do that in kindergarten. Now it's a little issue there. So what we've done now is, starting this year, is each grade is rounded to the nearest hundredth, then all summed up, and then rounded to the nearest whole. So that there's not, so every elementary, their K-6 is going to be a whole number, 26, 27, 19, whatever it is. And that actually, that change, if we had done it the old way, doing it this new way gave the elementaries 4 or 5 more FTEs than they would have had the old way. So it was a benefit to the elementaries in that way. And then the specialty FTE calculation is, it's approximately 2 hours of prep time per K-6 FTE. So once we get the sum, we add up all those that each grade gets, it sums up to, we round to the nearest whole, then we have a formula that generates the specialty based on how many teachers are at the school, not how many students.
Is there a point in time in which we would look at the out-of-area requests, particularly for kindergarten in some of the areas where we know people are trying to come in, but principals are saying, you know, either I don't have room or I can put you on a wait list. If we already know there's X amount of people that want to be in that school, can we start building that in? I mean, we talk about supporting, you know, school choice and parents can apply anywhere, but we're not really backing that up with the FTE to do it.
Yeah, well, when we do our projections, we base it on, not on, we don't know how many kindergartners are coming or how many live in that area. We don't have any tracking of that. We're estimating what they've done in the past. So if a school has traditionally had a lot of out of area they've requested, it's going to catch up to that in the projections and they'll receive that. We're not restricting what they can bring in based on that, other than they have that and they may be filled. They may say, we're not going to do this because it would put us over, but it's after they get that amount. But a lot of the out of area comes through in the enrollment projections. Like when we say like an AF junior, we're pretty close on their projection, even though they have so many, you know, I think it's like 300 or 400 that come out of area. We don't miss their projection by that amount because traditionally they've had that many come out of area, so we're continuing to project that way. So same thing with an elementary. If they have a lot that are coming that they accept out of area, it will eventually catch up where they are receiving the credit for that.
Right, that doesn't help them now, right? So if there's a year where we see a larger group, there's a 15 kid waiting list at a school, you're saying that, oh, well, if over the course of time you continue to have that number, it will catch up. That doesn't help the parents who are trying to put their kids in for the upcoming school year, which we have the majority of that before FTEs are given out, right? That period opens in November.
Yeah, I think the process there would be the principal saying, I have this great need, talking to their supervisor, say, can I have an extra half or
We get the
full
FTE, do we have the teacher, do we have, and is it enough to generate a full classroom, or would it just build a lot of those factors need to be taken into consideration?
So, do we know if we have any of the abbreviated kindergarten shortened day? Did any of those carry at any school?
For
Yes.
next year? Or for
Yeah,
current?
the next year.
We haven't done kindergarten registration.
We had one in Linden, have
You
This
had
past
one?
year, we've had one in Desert.
Past year.
I was just trying to think under what circumstances you would have a big shift from out of area if there was an abbreviated
Well, you would just
program.
Well, there's a lot, in a lot of different schools,
Yes,
there
you have
there
out
are
of area
families trying to get
here.
kindergartners.
Oh, I
there-
know that,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And the other part, there are some, even if they don't have that dedicated half-day school, there's still, throughout every school, there's some that choose to do the half-day, and we can't count them as a full day when we're sending in the information for our counts for ADM. So we even calculate that in a little bit. We've seen the last few years that it's about 95% that have the option for full day do that, but the 5% choose to do half day. So a small part, but that figures into the calculation a little bit also. Okay, so.
Oh,
this had-
sorry, I do
yeah.
have a question. So with the specialty FTE allocation, do you ever have like a minimum on that? Because, I mean, I'm seeing on the next slide, there are several places where, you know, you don't even have one specialty, for
Yeah.
example, or you have to have hourly or part-time. Is there any, you know, place where you're like, well, it's gonna take at least one person to do any specialty or
The
whatever?
minimum that's based into the calculations is 0.5. Other than at Cedar Valley, they qualify for less than a quarter but get a quarter. And so, but the minimum is 0.5 for any school.
And this is dollar equivalent in an FTE that then they hire hourlies with that.
Yeah, anything that's less than a 0.5 is an hourly position. They can give a 0.5 contract or a 0.75 or 6, although any variable between there. So example here, let's see, so it's taking the projection. So if we look at, let's take like a cascade here. So kindergarten, they're getting 3.99, the 4.72, 5.02, those all sum up. If you sum those, it's not going to equal 29, but after rounded it is. And so each one of those, but like I said, overall this year there was 4 or 5 extra FTEs than at the old formula.
And do you always round up, or are there some that round down?
It rounds up or down, it's just rounding to the nearest. If the funding was available and we could always round up, we would do that. But it would cost, in this case, on average, it would cost about 30, well, I guess about 15 FTEs, since half the schools probably round up, half round down. Okay, so going to this slide, so FY26 allocation for elementary, there's about 1,560 FTEs, a decline of 18.03 from FY25 allocation. So some declining enrollment there overall, so there's about 18 less. So the average elementary has 26 FTEs, with the max at Desert Sky of about 46, the minimum at Northridge of about 13, other than Cedar Valley, which has the 6-9 order. So they have a 1 through 6, they have a K1 combination, I believe, and then they have the 0.25 for the specialty. What I wanted to show on these individual slides that are at the end, and I added one, what I was wanting to show here is, so like with Brookhaven, I have this highlighted as 5.23. So they, in 4th grade, they had 5 1/4 or 5.23 that they generated from the 157 projection. So 157 divided by the 30.2 is 5.23. So if they only had 5 FTEs allocated for that grade, they have 0.23 more, which equates to about 8 students. So the key here, if you're at a school that's projected to have over 1,000 students, when those extra 8 or 9 students in a grade, when you can't move them up to 6 FTEs but only 5, they're only having to put 1 or 1.5 or 1 or 2 in each of those classes to be able to spread out that extra. So they're really not going to feel that when you have 1 or 2 extra. But when we're looking at a centennial, it's kind of in the middle of 675 students. So this one is about a quarter over on that 1st grade. So again, a quarter of the 26 there, so that's going to be about 6.5, 7 students. So you're putting about 2 students in each of those 3 classes. They're gonna feel that a little bit, but it's better to spread that over 3 or 4 than over 1 or 2. Lehigh is an example here, just showing their allocations. It's nice when those the rounding comes close to a whole number. When it's in between, then there's got to be some consideration. Some of that maybe bounce up. When we're
Jason, that's not in the slide deck.
No, it's
Keep
not. It
going,
was
yes.
added. Julie
Oh.
asked me to add that later.
Can you send that to us?
Sure. Okay, with Foothill, I have Foothill and Northridge. The example here is just looking at just the small numbers. So the schools that are declining, this one shows that they are getting 420 as their projection for their regular ed students next year. And so when they're having an ALL program, we've received some feedback just saying we don't have enough to be able to do these things, and it gets harder and harder for schools as they're declining in enrollment. So this 420, where a few years ago they were at 650 or 700 students, and before they'd have the ALL starting in 3rd grade, they may have 2 or 3 non-ALL classes per grade, and then that 1 ALL. But now we can see even in 4th grade there, they've only got 2 generating for 2 FTEs. And so it causes some hard decisions to be able to make that. And then when we're looking at Northridge, so they have 12 FTEs here for 7 grades, so they're projected to have 327 students next year. So we're looking at that. You'd have 2 in kindergarten, but then you're looking at saying, okay, we have to have a first, second split, a third, fourth split, a fifth, sixth split, to be able to make that work. There may be one other you can eliminate, but it just gets harder to be able to do that. And in this case, if they have something where they have an extra quarter FTE that has 7 or 8 students, you're having to split those between 1.5 or 2 classes. That's going to really change the size of the class.
So maybe I'm missing it, but are there special FTEs added when they have a special program like ALL, for example? Or is it just whatever the student population is, that's lumped into it as well? Are there considerations taken for, say, ALL?
So for ALL and for DLI, we're projecting, so if you look at when we do the projections at Foothill, you can see here at 2nd grade, they have 55 students in 2nd grade this year. That's in that right here where I'm showing that. And we're projecting that they'll in 3rd grade grow to 61 because 3rd grade's when they bring that in. So we're already projecting extra students there. But there isn't funding available to say, oh, you have an ALL, you have a DLI. It's based on student enrollment. So it's funded from the regular funding of things. So there isn't extra that's given because of that. So it does make it, when you have a school, if you have an ALL program in a school that has 900 students, it's a little easier to be able to say, okay, we have 2 or 3 extra, or 2 or 3 non-ALL classes, and we can be able to do this. But like in this case, those students that are, the ALL, they know they're going to be in with the same students for 4 years or 3 years, but also the English ones and these ones are going to be, there's no movement of, oh, I can't work well with this student,
There's no
and we separate,
choice.
there's no choice in those things.
Yeah, I mean, my concern is if we offer the program, we should be able to, anyway.
But they get
It's a
the
different
funding for the
conversation,
students
but-
that are in the program. It's just when you have a small
Right.
enrollment, it's very hard to support a dual language immersion or a gifted and talented with a small geographical population. You just don't have the flexibility. So the funding comes with the students, with the program. So every student they come in, that's factored into the FTE. You just don't have the flexibility when you have a small enrollment school to buffer those programs. We see that with dual language immersion and gifted and talented.
Yeah, for the ALL and DLI, there is a little bit of extra funding that's provided from the state, but most of that just goes to some materials. It's not enough for teacher FTEs or other things, and so it's just coming from the regular general fund.
But if they have 30 kids, 60 kids that qualify for that program out of area they're coming into, they're going to get the FTEs for
Yeah,
those kids.
correct. But we see in those ALL, a lot of them, I mean, they will, it just depends on year to year, and that'll fluctuate, we use that in the projections, but they'll move up. There's more students that say, well, this is easier because I'm already at the school, there may be some that get an invitation, they qualify for the ALL, but they're saying, I don't like it, but I don't want to change schools, and so there's some things where the percentage coming from out of that boundary are less than the ones in that boundary just because of ease of my
Choice,
siblings are here, or I've just been at the school.
But this is where we make the case for consolidation and creating a healthier
Yes.
enrollment.
Yeah, we'll go over
Done it
that
yesterday.
some later, but there are those, we talked about this a little bit, but the schools in the south, there's 2 in Linden and the 6 that are in North Orem are all experiencing quite a bit of declining enrollment, where right now those 8 schools have an average of about 495 students, but in our projections for 29, that average is like 390 students. And you can see even Northridge there was at 327, and they've kind of already hit that. They're in 4 more years, they're at 310, so it's not changing a lot, but 327 is a low number. Foothill is at 420, but in 4 years is projected to be at 310 also. So there is that great need to, it's not always a financial issue of, let's look at all this saving, it's really a student and
It's
a
an
teaching.
education
It's an
issue.
education issue. Okay, any other questions on this slide deck?
So, could you go back to that Northridge one, just to make sure I understand? So, that 1.44 in 5th grade, you would round that down to 1. So if they didn't do some kind of split grade, then you'd have to take that other, 0.44 of whatever our thing is. So it'd be almost like 15 students you'd have to put in that one class.
Right, I'll
If you
pull
didn't
this-
do a split grade.
I'll pull this up for Northridge on the. So Northridge, had we done the old formula rounding to the nearest half, they would have qualified for 11 FTEs. But with the calculation, when we sum up all of their round to the nearest, they have 11.64, so it rounds up to the 12. So in this case, when you're looking at those numbers, what you could do here, I don't know what the school has decided, but if they only had the 11 and they had 2 in kindergarten, then they'd have to have 3 total in first and second, 3 total in third and fourth, and 3 total in fifth and sixth to get to the 11. In this case, that extra FTE they received, they probably want to put it in the lower grades at first, because these are at 1.57 and 1.72. So down here, if they had 2 kindergarten, 2 first grade, 2 second grade, then they're going to have a third, fourth split, and a fifth, sixth split to be able to make that work. So yeah, this, if you round it down to the 1.44, they're going to have 45 students in one class. But by doing 1.5, they're going to have about 30 students on average per class, and the ratio is 31. So they're going to be below in that case. But the 6th grade at 1.69, if they have 1.5, they're going to be a little bit above. But in those split classes, they don't have to have, well, you have 15 and 15, it may be a 16, 14 or something to be able to get that to the right balance. And so that's what the supervisors, elementary supervisors, help the principals with, is figuring out. And I met with the elementary supervisors last Friday and went through all their requests that are coming in for extra FTEs, just to be able to see, okay, is it really needed there? There may be a split, but they can only do a split second, fifth, which they're not going to do that. So there's many things that go in behind the scenes to be able to look at that.
As they bring in those numbers and are advocating for an additional FTE, do we do that now, or do we start to wait a little bit till we know their numbers are
That's a great
evened
question.
out?
Yeah,
Like,
well-
when do we pull that trigger?
Well, the hiring process is starting soon, and so they don't want to get behind and not be able to have their choice of ones later on. But what we've done for this upcoming year, and we've done the last couple of years, is hold back. So like the elementary supervisors have about 50 FTEs, try and hold back half of those to be able to see how the enrollments start coming in. So hold those back till May and June to be able to see, but the other ones trying to allocate beforehand to be able to get in the hiring process.
But once those are given out, and if a school qualifies after that, then they still have to go through the additional process.
If a school qualifies because
Like if they
yeah,
had growth and they had a new number, right, then they go through a different process.
to request that.
Right.
Right. Yeah, but that's why we're holding back the 25. Plus, in Truth and Taxation, this last year the board authorized another 45, and so we're trying to keep those to be able to allocate as needed.
You can't get as good at teachers later, right? So you try to get as many as you can.
Just depending, yeah.
Well, we
We
just
have
have
more
some
flex-
areas that have to hire them much later because they have to go through an additional process.
Same process now, because we have the 45 to allocate, so as they have them, we allocate, as they need them, we allocate.
Yeah, and the requests that I've seen coming in are pretty balanced throughout the areas of the district. There's not a heavy emphasis on any area when looking at all those.
Do we, again, just looking like growth affects areas differently, like an area that grows a lot between now and start of school, then they get those teachers that are hired at the end. Do we ever look ahead and say, we anticipate that this is gonna bubble up, so we're gonna go ahead and allocate that FTE now?
Yeah, and so the key there is that we don't, their FTE allotment isn't based on what they're currently at, it's on their projection for next October. So their
Right.
growth on there, hopefully we get it right. We don't get it always right, but we're pretty close. So if we're saying the school is gonna grow by 120 students from this October 1 to next, they're getting those extra FTEs in the allocation process. So that, I think that's a key to understand, is they don't need the board given the 45 or the 50, they're already getting those because we projected. And if we project a growing school is gonna grow by 100 and they only grow by 75, we don't take away an FTE because we over-projected there.
And their average daily membership, if it's a growing school, that should give them a little bit of a boost, right?
Right.
Well,
Because
they're-
they're,
Percentage.
yeah, because what we're giving the allocation on what they're gonna be on the 90th day, not on the October 1st.
Right.
when you send this out again with the addition of Lehigh, can you put in a column so we can see what the FTEs were in this year? Just because I'm afraid so many of my questions are because I don't have enough information.
Yeah.
So
We have a summary sheet we'll put on there, including that.
Thank you, this is wonderful data.
Awesome.
I don't think we've ever had this much visibility into this process, and it's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think it evolves every year in terms of we see needs, and so we develop processes to meet those needs. The supervisor allocated FTEs now to 45 to address what Stacy was talking about. Don't harm those that are going to grow later in the process. They go through a different process, so I think we have more flexibility now to meet those needs. We're still trying to be judicious with that, wise with that. Supervisors do a great job working with principals, but I think what this evidence is to me is that there are some challenges with high growth schools, and there are challenges with declining enrollment schools. And those challenges are not always met in the same way, but they all present opportunities and challenges. There are some unique things, I think, to Alpine with respect to FT is not allocated on actual cost of the teacher, but average, and so schools can hire the best person for that
That's a
position.
real advantage.
And not say, I'm gonna try and I'll hire all first-year teachers so I can save a little bit on my FTEs here. So there's a lot of things in the system that over the years have been developed to attract and retain quality teachers. Not perfect, but I think we
So-
try and get better.
Our intention for the FTEs this year is we get the requests from schools throughout the district. Supervisors will allocate them. We aren't planning on doing anything special this year with that process. Is that correct?
Yeah, the supervisors come and request that for DLT and send in those requests, and then we look at those, and so it's not, those get approved by DLT and through that process. But we are trying to see, okay, what percentage is this from the different areas to try and keep it as close as possible.
Okay.
Any further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Bea, for those presentations. President King, we'll turn back over to you.
Okay, we are adjourned until we have our board meeting at 6 o'clock. Thank you all.